Welcome to Head Heart Homefront, brought to you by the Barry Robinson Center, the country's leading behavioral health residential treatment center for military kids. I'm your host, Erin Lindstrom, and I'm so glad you're here. The Barry Robinson Center created this interview series to celebrate Military Family Month. We're bringing together mental health leaders to chat about building resiliency and healthy, happy families through the ups and downs of military life. We know military life can be challenging for our kids, and it can also present amazing opportunities. In these conversations, we talk about tips, tools, and techniques to navigate the highs and lows for both you and your children. The conversations have been incredible, and we are so excited to share this episode with you. Hey, welcome back to Head Heart Homefront. I'm Erin Lindstrom, and I'm here with Dr. Anna Crane, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and owner of NBB Psychology, which is a private practice. So this interview is going to be amazing. Before we hop into it, I want to share a little bit about Dr. Anna's background with you, and then we will get to the conversation. So Dr. Anna has extensive experience working with military families, particularly families within special forces, and understands the unique challenges faced within military life. She has been recognized by Navy Special Warfare Command for her commitment to NSW families. Dr. Anna has consulted with a variety of organizations, including military groups, treatment facilities, and nonprofits on various topics impacting military service members, veterans, and their families. She has worked over a decade and has experience providing workshops and retreats to military and Gold Star family members of all ages. Dr. Anna is a certified UCLA focused family, early childhood, and couples resiliency trainer. She's received her BS in psychology from the College of William and Mary and her MS and PhD in clinical psychology with specialization in clinical child psychology from Ohio University. So Dr. Anna, that's a pretty incredible bio. We are so grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, and I would love if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing a little bit about your story and how did you come into this work and kind of like find your path in this world of helping and healing?
Well, I think psychology is something that I've probably been doing most of my entire life. It started in high school. I had a lot of friends. I liked listening to them. And one of the areas that I found interesting, which is strange as a teenager, is to be like, why are you acting like this? And I found myself kind of looking at their parents of all things, kind of being like, what's going on in the home? And how come you're being like this? And this person's handling this like this over there. And that kind of developed and continued to develop. So probably starting at the age of 14, I created some teen counseling programs, peer-to-peer programs in high school. And I think I've just been loving it pretty much since I was born.
That's pretty incredible. Like to know that in high school and actually take initiative to like get started.
It was fun. I just enjoy it. I love it. And then the military, I was just really grateful and fortunate to kind of end up with working with military families. I was offered an opportunity to become part of the focus program right out of residency when I was here in Virginia Beach. And I just loved working with the community that I was with and really enjoyed working with military families.
Amazing. Wow, that's incredible. So with your work with military families, I would love to hear a bit about what are some of the like unique challenges and opportunities you see with this population?
I think for the kids and especially the teenagers, they are such a mature group of children. I just really enjoy working with them. When I give suggestions, they have amazing insights. They really think things through. They often have a really diverse perspective based on having moved several different places or just dealing with kind of different life events that other children don't necessarily have to deal with at their age.
Right.
So while there are some extra stressors with that, sometimes in terms of multiple moves or deployments or missing out on a parent, sometimes dealing with injuries, death, those sorts of things. There's certainly stressors and challenges, but on the other hand, there's just kind of this maturity and different life perspective that I seem to really enjoy and see quite often.
That's so interesting. And something but this idea of maturity, I think is really interesting because so often we're like resiliency and they get it, they're moving, we're making it work. And there is an element of like growing up a little bit and having to understand things that a lot of times most kids don't really come into contact with until adulthood.
Correct. Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
And yet walking to new schools, kind of like becoming themselves and all of that identity stuff that comes up along the way. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty, I think that what I see quite a bit is when thrown with difficult challenges, there's a lot of grace. So kids are often, they'll step up, they'll take extra responsibilities. You see that a lot, particularly during deployments, or if there's been an injury, sharing of responsibilities, or again, taking care of the younger children if they're an older child. Just being willing to work together as a team to make everything work. And I think that does create, like you said, this amazing maturity and kind of a different perspective on life, and learning how to be part of a system. Where other times, other people in different circumstances might not understand or get to be part of a system that works like that.
Got it.
The other side of it, though, is when you have these kids who are amazingly mature, they often, not often, but I see that sometimes there's the flip side where they don't get to have as much fun being just a kid sometimes. Or because there's such a needed focus on getting things done and making sure everything's taken care of, sometimes it's easy to kind of forget that opportunity to just play and just to have a little bit of that freedom to, even if playing, like if we're out there shooting hoops or playing basketball, it's not about improving skills necessarily, but it's just about having fun and being silly and being goofy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And something that's come up for me even recently, my kids who are 6 and 7, and kind of the expectations that I have of them, right? With like dealing with virtual school right now, and then having to kind of check myself and be like, okay, you're a baby in a big body. like you are not an adult. Like this doesn't have to be easy. Like, let's go back to like having fun for a minute.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of like when you're asking a 7-year-old to sit in front of a computer for 7 hours, they absolutely need like every 15 minutes, get up, get the wiggles out, scream, run around in circles, and then come back, or go outside and run around in a loop around the cul-de-sac, or just something silly and goofy.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to maintain that kind of maturity level for a long period of time.
Yeah. And I imagine it's actually important to like, while that's all great and there's like opportunity there, right? On the other side, is there the same opportunity like in play and kind of like that unstructured like childhood vibe?
Opportunity for growth within that play?
Yeah. Like, is that just as important?
Okay. It is critical because that play, and even for teenagers, right? Teenagers need to play too. We're not talking just little kids when we talk about play. The play looks different. So, a 7-year-old might be blowing bubbles or spinning in circles, though honestly, for a 14 or 15-year-old to just get out and spin in circles sometimes isn't such a bad idea either.
Right.
But that play is critical to healthy development across the age span. It's an opportunity to let go of stress, so you're not internalizing it. If you internalize stress, kids tend to get those anxious feelings. My stomach hurts, my heart might be racing, I can't sleep at night because I have thoughts going through my head all the time. If they're given opportunity where they can just kind of cut loose, play, be silly, laugh, we know for a fact that laughter itself has amazing positive properties in your body. It's really good for you. That allows them to maybe then get kind of emotionally regulate in a different way and be able to cope with all those feelings in a different way so that they are not internalizing or experiencing some of that anxious thoughts or sometimes depressive thoughts, or just feeling kind of blah or down, especially teenagers. If they're in their rooms all the time on their computer, they're not talking to anybody. That is like the number one recipe for getting some depressive kind of experiences.
Yeah.
So getting them out of their room, socializing, interacting, it's really important for the development.
What does that look like on the parent side? Like, let's say if we had a middle school or high school age child who's kind of like past I don't want to just play outside anymore. Can you talk a little bit about like, what might that look like, or how can you kind of bring play into their world?
Absolutely. So, yes, there's video games.
Right.
Definitely, and they love it. And particularly if they're socializing with their friends on their video games, that is actually important and healthy. It is true right now with COVID and the fact that they tend to be in their rooms and on their computer all the time. We want to, in addition to that important socializing piece, we also want to get them out of their rooms. And that can look like, hey, just come hang out in the garden with me for a little bit. Even if you don't want to plant or weed, because if we get into weeding and mowing the lawn, those are important things that's good for them in terms of physical, movement, being outside, but that's going to feel like a chore, right? That's again a responsibility. But if you could just come out and just talk with me for a little bit. If you want to build a dirt pile, or if you don't want to get dirty, that's fine. But just sit with me while I'm out here.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like it's really about like just connecting and kind of being together.
Absolutely.
Less about the doing or like.
Yes, it's being together without expectations.
I love that. So we don't need to cross anything off the to-do list except like hanging out.
Exactly. Or going for a walk. Teens and preteens, they might drag their feet and grumble about, I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to be there. But once they get going, I have a 13 and a 15-year-old, two boys. But once I get them out there, they're like, oh, you know what? I actually kind of like this. And they might not even say that because teenagers aren't necessarily known for expressing those feelings. But that is the best opportunity to have that ability to get some information out, talk to them, connect with them, or just look at the trees while you go for a walk and breathe.
Yep. I love that invitation, just to kind of like, oh, maybe something that goes on your to-do list is to like, to hang, to go do something where there is no crossing off. Absolutely. And really creating that space. I think it's very easy as a parent who like is busy and handling all of the things, and with the, you know, complications of military life and whatever might be happening at that time, to put something on your to-do list that's like hang out almost feels like this isn't helping us. And we're so like goal focused and oriented that this is a nice like reminder of, oh, that's actually just as important, if not more important than getting everything done, unpacking boxes, going to the sports team, like whatever it is.
And the other kicker as a parent that I find myself getting trapped into easily too is hanging out. It only needs to be 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't need to be long, but that's also not the time, particularly if you're with teens or preteens when you're going on a walk, to point out all the things they're doing wrong or the things that they need to focus on or the things they need to buckle down on. That really needs to be the judgment-free, no getting on your case, just enjoying, trying to enjoy each other. And I do find I have to bite my tongue sometimes, but that's like a key point to that.
I love that. And I feel like that probably crosses over into other relationships too, right? If we have no time to just be together and we're just constantly like working on what's coming up, then there's no room for like the connection to really be there and for like the flower to bloom, it feels like.
Absolutely. Yep.
Interesting. So you have like some background with resiliency training, and we were talking about focus earlier. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that can help some of our military connected families?
Absolutely. So for anybody who's connected with the military, Focus is a UCLA-based family resiliency training program. And what it does is it offers tools and skills, trainings. You know, military service members get trained all the time. This is kind of for the whole family. And it is a wonderful way to get the family on the same page, have the same tools of what do we do? How do we problem solve? How do we communicate? How do we, you know, communicate how we're feeling in that moment? And what can we do as a family to help each other out and feel better? They specialize in pre-deployment, post-deployment, reintegration, all of those things. How to talk about injuries, how to talk about brain injury, how to talk about PTSD. But it's all done at age-appropriate levels, and it's a time-limited program, and it's 100% free. It's open to all active duty military, sometimes all active duty military, and the service member can be home or the service member can be deployed. So the service member doesn't even have to be present to be able to access it. And like I said, it's typically maybe about 5 to 8 sessions, depending on the family, and completely free.
That's amazing. And it's interesting hearing you kind of like go through some of the things that you learn. It sounds like many of the skills are communication based.
Absolutely. Yep. To get everybody kind of on the same page. Okay.
Can you talk to us a little bit about like, why is communication so important when it comes to resiliency and kind of like navigating the highs and lows of military life?
Well, you know, I don't know about you, but I sometimes have a small tendency to do something called mind reading. I assume that I know exactly why my child's mad right now. I assume that I know exactly why my husband's irritated with me in this moment. And excuse me, without having the language or the ability to say, hey, I noticed that you seem to be kind of upset right now. What language do I need? Like, what word can I use? So maybe for my youngest child, they understand what angry means, or they understand what mad means. My older child, he's going to prefer frustrated or aggravated. So what it does is it offers an opportunity where you can all have shared language. So you understand a little bit clearer what somebody means when they say, this is how I'm feeling. And then with that communication, the next step is trying to figure out in that moment, sometimes, especially with parents, right? The biggest thing is when a child's really upset or angry or feeling out of control, we want to sit down and talk to them about why. Or we want to sit down and talk to them about, well, how can I help you? But the thing is when somebody's typically in that moment, we call that alligator brain. They're not thinking logically. That's the whole thing that happens when our emotions are out of control. We are feeling out of control. So our ability to think, have a rational thought, not there. It's fight or flight or freeze. So as a parent, when I'm trying to have a rational conversation with my child or my spouse, when one of us is not in that mode, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
So the communication tools that you learn that are really important are what do we do in those moments so that that person can take care of how they're feeling in a way that doesn't negatively impact the whole family, but is also helpful. Because typically when you try to have a conversation with somebody who's already upset, it doesn't go very well.
Right.
So it gives the whole family tools to be like, okay, if somebody's really upset, they get to take a timeout. But during that timeout, there's a couple things they already know they can do to make themselves feel better.
I feel like that's one of the most important things that you can learn as a human
Mm-hmm.
is like really, number one, the first thing you said about like mind reading and just remembering that like, oh, we all have inner worlds where there's tons of things happening and like, I might not know everything.
Yep.
And like, we're constantly making up stories about what we think is going on and what is true. And actually taking a moment just to remember like, oh, you're having your own experience. Like maybe I can just meet you in that and ask you some questions versus assuming I know everything is so powerful.
Absolutely. Or is it even now the time to ask questions?
Right. And I loved what you said about that too, and kind of that alligator brain, where if your child or your spouse or really anyone is kind of having that moment where you can see they're engaged in the emotion, like taking a beat and just kind of like witnessing them and not making it about you can be so powerful.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. And I imagine too that there must be like some sort of link with when you're taking the walks and building connection with people that your trust is building, even though you're not really doing anything. So when those kind of moments come up, you actually have like ground to stand on where they don't feel like you're attacking them because you're not constantly attacking them anymore.
Exactly. And if you're also just listening, then they're not feeling judged, right?
Right.
Just even asking a question of like, well, why are you feeling like that right now? If you're really angry, you could be like, oh, you're saying I shouldn't be feeling this way. And somebody feels judged and you're like, that's not what I meant.
Right.
But being able to understand that, you know what, you just need a timeout or take some time, do your things that make you happy.
Yep.
And let's come back and actually talk about it.
I love that. And in my work, I typically refer to that as like holding space.
Yep.
And something else that came up in another interview we did for Head Heart Homefront was this idea of having a hula hoop around you, where like you're inside the hula hoop and you get to be you and everyone gets a hula hoop. So you don't need to be like inside theirs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. So for parents who might be listening to this and taking away some amazing techniques here, and also perhaps struggling with their kid and really like finding that connection, or we talked about depressive episodes before, whatever's kind of coming up. Can you talk a little about what you would recommend they kind of like do, or where to start when things aren't going perfectly, which I think is most of us?
Yes, especially right now.
Yeah.
For parents, so if we're talking just in our own homes, ironically enough, I know people hear it all the time, but it is the whole, how are you doing yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? Because if you're completely at the end of your rope with nothing left to give or no patience left, then it doesn't really matter what you do for your kids. It is not going to be effective. So I think number one as a parent is taking a look at yourself and saying, do I need to take a break? And if I do, how can I create that?
I have chills right now because it's like, oh, that's the realest piece of advice, where it's like, again, when things outside of you are all crazy and then you have to kind of look at yourself and just check in. So important.
Because I find for myself in particular, if I'm starting to get really snappy with my kids, okay, what's going on with me first? Because they might be like, where's this coming from? And I'm like, well, of course it's because you didn't pick up your clothes. And then I really think about it. I'm like, no, it's because I already came in irritated from work, or I already came in something. So I've got to do my own self-check. And that's the hardest thing, particularly when things feel like they're out of control and flying all over the place, to be able to take a moment and check on yourself. I think sometimes there's that panic of, well, if I stop and I pay attention and I take care of myself as a parent, then all the other things are going to fall apart. It's not actually the case. It feels like that, but it's not actually the case. So number one, make some time, take care of yourself, check in with yourself. Do you need just to sit down with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just take 5 minutes? Can you swap kids with somebody else for a little bit and give each other a break? Any type of thing like that. So that's number one. Number two, like we talked about, seeing if you can create some fun time where phones are off. You're not checking, news is off. Everything that could be a distractor is off. And you have 10 to 15 minutes of just focused fun time. Third, if you're really feeling overwhelmed, I would absolutely reach out to something like the Focus program that we talked about. That's focusproject.org. So to kind of check that out, or to reach out to anybody else, Command, Ombudsman, other social supports, to just be like, I think we need a little assistance here.
Absolutely. Oh, amazing. Well, This has been like incredible. There are some things here that are just like such small reframes when we're talking about it, but I feel like can actually like change everything. So I so appreciate you taking the time and having this conversation. And I'm wondering if there's anything from like your journey in this life, in this profession, right, in this field, is there one thing that you would kind of want anyone to know listening to kind of like take away?
Oh, that's a challenge.
Yeah,
That's
not to put you on the spot.
I know. No, I think as a parent, that self-care piece, and I know it's so trite because I know we hear it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I do, I have the advantage of my children in high school now and middle school. But when I think about like when they were really young with the younger kids, if I had taken to heart that I really could put them, not put them aside, but take that hour or two for myself every day and get that extra support and say, you know what, I can't do this 100% by myself because we can't. It's not realistic to expect people to have to do things completely by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my kids and I would have benefited so much more during that time period.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being here. And thank you for the work you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I really, really appreciated it.
You've been listening to Head, Heart, Homefront, a production from the Barry Robinson Center, the country's leading behavioral health residential treatment center for military kids. Many times, kids with behavioral and mental health issues don't improve with typical treatment options in their community. Families may need to consider long-term residential care, and this is where the Barry Robinson Center excels. They're a mission-focused nonprofit organization based in Virginia. Their residential center is the only one in the country that works exclusively with military kids. They understand the military community as many of their employees are military connected. Their high-quality treatment includes a wide range of services to help improve the lives of children. If your child needs additional support, check out barryrobinson.org. Navigating mental health can be challenging, and we want you to know that you do not have to do it alone. Thank you so much for listening to Head, Heart, Homefront. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let us know with a 5-star review if you're listening to the podcast, or a like, comment, or share if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube. Until next time, be well.